Today I'm going to make a plantain salve. Plantain is normally considered a weed because it grows really easily and sort of everywhere. You can find it in driveways and open fields. It grows really abundantly in our public parks here in the UK. Plantain is really good for helping bug bites to recover, for helping wounds to recover more quickly. It's definitely a salve that I like to have on hand during the summertime. I'll take you through the whole process of how to forage plantain, what it looks like, how to prepare it, and then how to make the salve itself. Plantain has sort of oval-shaped leaves that come out, and then it has a tall stem that comes out with a little flower bud at the top. The leaves have parallel veins that run from the bottom to the top of the leaves, and the leaves grow very close to the ground, and it will have a very thin sort of flower stalk that comes out, and the flower buds are kind of greenish brownish. You can buy plantain online that's dried already if you can't find it in your local community somewhere. Historically, it was used to treat burns and bug bites, mild skin issues. There was actually a study done on the effectiveness of plantain to treat burn. The study found that it was an effective treatment against even second-degree burns. Plantain, again, grows everywhere very readily, so it's easy to find and free for a lot of people. When you harvest plantain, if you're foraging it like I do, make sure that you are foraging it from a place that hasn't been sprayed with poisonous herbicides or pesticides. Where we live, the public park that we go to has banned the use of glyphosate, which is incredible, but I'm not sure about where you live if they use glyphosates or other poisonous chemicals on their green area to kill off weeds. If you can find plantain in your lawn or your neighbor's lawn and you know that you don't spray your lawn with anything, you could forage from there. It's best to use dried plant material when making a salve because the first step of making a salve is to infuse an oil with the plant material. And when your plant material has water in it, it dilutes the oil a bit and it can make the oil go rancid more quickly, especially for plants with a lot of water content like mullein or calendula. So if you're foraging your plantain, all you need to do is just take the leaves off and then wash them and pat them dry and then lay them out on a cooling rack so they can have airflow on both sides and sit them out for maybe a week, 2 weeks until most of the moisture has evaporated, and then you can use those leaves to make this salve. You can also, of course, just buy dried plantain online, which is what I have done in the past, so I have a bit of extra here. What you need to make this salve is some sort of carrier oil. The reason for that is that the first step is to infuse your oil with plantain. So you need an oil to do that in. I have two here that I want to finish up the sweet almond oil that I've used for other things that I've made recently. And then I also have fractionated coconut oil, which means it's coconut oil that stays liquid. It doesn't get hard. You can use jojoba oil. That would actually be really nice. That would be my preference if I had any. I like jojoba oil because it has a high vitamin E content, which helps the salve last longer. Vitamin E kind of acts as a preservative. You can also use a high quality olive oil, so you can really use what you have. You need dried plantain. Buy it online or you can forage it yourself. A strainer of some kind. You need beeswax. You can buy it in a big chunk of beeswax or these little pellets, and I much prefer the pellets because they melt more easily. You can use like a cheese grater to grate your beeswax chunk, but it just gets on your cheese grater and beeswax is quite sticky. Whenever you're making salves that use beeswax or even shea butter, you want to invest in, what I did is I went to a thrift store and bought supplies that I didn't care if they got beeswax on them, like permanently. I bought a little whisk and I bought this little glass bowl to make a double boiler with. Beeswax is really impossible to get off. Sometimes you can heat beeswax up so it's melted and then wipe it out with a paper towel right away and it gets most of it, but honestly, it's really difficult to get it fully removed. So with all the supplies that the melted beeswax will touch, I definitely recommend going to a thrift store and just getting like a cheap bowl and whisk that you can use over and over in all of the things that you make with beeswax. You'll also need a container to store the salve in. You can use anything that you can rub your finger in easily. So a little glass jar that you recycle from food that you've eaten, or a little lip balm container, whatever you have. I invested in buying a set of these salve containers. You'll need a glass jar to allow your oil and herb to steep. You'll need a double boiler. I, again, just bought this secondhand glass bowl and I just put it on a small saucepan. I also have a little whisk to help break up beeswax as we melt it. Okay, so I think that's everything that you need. You can add lavender essential oil for scent, or you can add tea tree essential oil, which adds more of an astringent property to the salve, boosts that wound healing property of plantain. The reason I like to make a salve with plantain is because it makes applying the beneficial compounds to the skin very easily, obviously, because it's in a salve that you can just rub right onto whatever kind of topical skin issue that you're having. So the first step of making the salve is to take your plantain leaves after they've sat out on the counter for a while and they're dried, and chop them up into small pieces. It maximizes the surface area of the plant material to the oil, so the oil has a better chance of extracting all the beneficial properties from the plant. When you buy it online, it comes like very cut up, just very small pieces. When you cut up your own, you don't need to have it so cut up, but you just don't want to put in full leaves to your jar. Definitely want to cut it up a bit. And then you add the plantain, to a glass jar. The measurements that I used roughly was about half a cup of plantain and 1 cup of oil. You want to have headspace over the plant material, so the plant material is always submerged within the oil. The plantain will normally float for a while. You can use a spoon to stir it into the oil, and then over time it will sink to the bottom. Then you just add a lid, and definitely label and date what it is and when you made it. I made this one in March, and it is now the end of May. And I would recognize what it is probably because it's green, but I would never have remembered when I made it. So definitely help yourself by labeling it. What I love about plantain salve is the color. It's just a beautiful green color. You can leave the covered jar somewhere that's not in direct sunlight, but that gets sun, and that'll speed up the extraction. I just put this in our pantry. But no matter what method that you use, you want to try to shake it every few days to keep everything moving and to make sure that no plantain is above the oil. Then after about 6 weeks, obviously I left mine for a lot longer than that, but about 6 weeks should be good. You can strain it off. So that's what I'm gonna do now. In the past, for making these oils and salves, I've recommended using cheesecloth, but I find that it's just quite messy and hard to clean the plant material off the cheesecloth. So I'm gonna try using a mesh strainer today. That should be easier to clean. I'm just gonna pour it off into this bowl. Look at that color, so pretty. And because it's been sitting so long, the plantain's just there at the bottom. Easy to strain off. Now, if I was using cheesecloth, I would get all of that out. In fact, I might kind of scrape it all out and then really squeeze it so you get all of the oil from all of this, because this stuff at the bottom will have a lot of benefits still. I can't actually remember what oil I used to make this. Maybe sweet almond? I would assume that's what it is. I have strained off the oil now, and it's this beautiful green color, which I love. And I'm going to start making the actual salve. But I did want to say that you can use the oil itself without a salve. You can use it just, store it in a dropper bottle, so you can squeeze the oil out and you can apply it right onto, minor skin injuries to help with healing that way as well. I like a salve because it's solid and I can put it in a bag and take it out with us if we go hiking or something. But the oil works as well if you want to store that in a home herbal remedies medicine cabinet. So to make the salve, I'm going to use my double boiler and melt some beeswax first, and then combine the melted beeswax with the plantain oil. Making salves with forage material is just one of the joys of my life. They're nourishing to your body, not harmful, they're medicinal, and all the plant material is just growing wild for free. I've got my 1/4 cup measuring cup here. I take 1/4 cup of beeswax. Beeswax is a thickening agent, so it will kind of mix with the oil to create the hardened texture of a salve. It can be overly hard if you add too much beeswax and make it unusable because it's so hard. When you rub it to get some, it doesn't melt. I've made many salves where It's been so hard after the beeswax has hardened that I can't like rub any out with my finger because there's not enough oil to keep it sort of liquidy. So I've had to melt it all back down and add more oil. So about a 1/4 cup of beeswax will go into the glass bowl. And then I'm going to put water in my little saucepan, put this on top, and melt the beeswax down. The smell of beeswax is so lovely when it's melting. It's just this warm, lovely scent. Love that smell. If you're like me and love making your own tinctures, summertime is so great because all the plants are fresh and you can harvest fresh leaves and flowers to make your own tinctures at home. I've made a guide with 6 really great tinctures to make in the summer because all the plants that you're using in them are fresh and easy to find. The guide gives you step-by-step instructions, super easy for people who are totally new to tincture making. There are photographs to help you go through the recipe and full ingredient lists and supply lists and all of that. Although it's really basic, you probably already have what you need. If you're interested in buying that, there's a link in the description below. So I am just mixing it a little bit to help it keep melting. You can see it's starting to melt. Now I'm going to add the infused oil. I've turned the heat off because I don't want the infused oil to be on the direct heat for very long because it will zap the beneficial compounds in the infused oil. So I'm going to add it into the beeswax with no heat and then turn the heat back on, quickly melt it down, and then get it off the heat again. Gonna mix it in. I am gonna add lavender. So I'm adding about 10 drops. So I've turned the heat back on. I'm gonna quickly melt this down and then turn it off again. Okay, so it's all melted together, you can see. So I'm gonna turn the heat off and then I'm gonna pour that mixture back into the salve container. I do wish that I had a funnel to help with this, but I'm gonna be really careful. Okay, I've opted to use a little plastic spoon to help me spoon this into the salve jar. So you can see it's liquid now, but this will harden up over the course of about 12 hours and your salve will be ready to use. I would recommend not adding a lid to your jar until it's completely hardened. So wait, a day or so it's completely hardened, and that way no humidity rises in the jar and creates a condensation. So I definitely have some left over from filling this container, and what I'm gonna do is just fill another one. I have multiple of these little jars. What I would recommend not doing is, if you have a lot extra as well, I wouldn't recommend just making a huge salve because it's hard to get through, and it's also hard to kind of reach way down deep with your finger into like the bottom of a deep container. Stick to using little ones that are kind of shallow and just fill many of them. So this salve will last about a year. I mean, it probably would last a lot longer. I just tend to say a year. If you open it and it has a smell, an unpleasant smell, or you see something moldy, obviously it's time to get rid of it and make a new one. I tend to make 1 a year or 2 a year, depending on how much we go through. I would recommend storing it in a dark place away from direct sunlight and a lot of heat. The direct sunlight will zap the essential oils from the plantain that's now infused into the salve. When it's really hot or humid, it can make it spoil more quickly. Store them in a cool, dark place. I store mine in our pantry or a cupboard. So to use it, I'm not a doctor. I would recommend, if you have any questions, speaking to someone who is a doctor or a trained herbalist. I'm self-taught. But what I do is I just take a little bit on my finger, like run it around a few times, and then I put it on the affected skin area, usually like a bug bite, a minor wound of some kind. It's a very basic, natural, but effective salve. I would recommend dating it and labeling it just so you don't forget what it is. Salves tend to look alike, especially if you use beeswax. They all sort of start to look the same, so always label them. I just use that like cream colored tape and then write with a Sharpie what it is and when I made it. You can always make it as a gift for someone who's outdoors a lot, maybe a family that spends a lot of time outside. It's a great summer gift idea. I will link all of the supplies that I used to make this in the description, and I also will link to the blog post of how to make the plantain-infused oil and then also the salve itself, so you can bookmark the recipe or print it off to refer back to. Let me know if you try making this and if there are any other salves that you're interested in learning how to make, and I will speak to you in the next Documenting Simple Living video.